Hey, good afternoon. So glad you could join us for our James Bible study this afternoon. We are almost done with this book. It's been really interesting to see how timely these words have been for us during this period of time. It's interesting. James, the younger brother of Jesus, wrote this 2,000 years ago, and it's amazing how applicable these words have been to us with what's going on right now in our lives. These words are still true today. We've discussed arguing and bickering. We've discussed showing favoritism, watching your tongue, finding wisdom, being humble, hoarding your money. All fun topics, right? And today's even more fun. It's on patience. In fact, I just talked to James McCracken and told him I was getting ready to do this video and that I was patient, and he just laughed. Thanks a lot, James. Appreciate it. Love your support there. It's everybody's favorite topic, right? I once heard that you want to never pray for patience because that means God's going to give you some trials that's going to develop that character in you. And we try to avoid trials at all costs, right? But here in James 5:7-12, we are encouraged to be patient. In fact, in these 6 verses, the word patience or persevere or wait is used 7 times. Let's take a look. It says, "Be patient then, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to reveal its valuable crop, and how patient he is for the autumn and spring rains. You too, be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near. Don't grumble against one another, brothers and sisters, or you will be judged. The judge is standing at the door. As an example of patience in the face of suffering, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. As you know, we consider blessed those who have persevered. You have heard of the perseverance of Job and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy. Above all, my brothers and sisters, do not swear, not by heaven or by earth or by anything else. Let your yes be yes and your no, no, or you will be condemned." So first, we're told to be patient until the coming of the Lord. Well, when will that be? Nobody knows. Jesus said nobody knows the day or the hour that Jesus is coming back only God knows. Even Jesus doesn't know. And so how do we wait for that? How are we patient for that? When we tell our children to be patient and wait for Christmas, they have a date, right? We know it's in so many weeks or so many days or so many hours. We know that it's December the 25th every year. And so we can be patient because we know there is an end. But gosh, we don't know when Jesus is coming back. So how can we be patient and wait for this? Did you know that the early disciples thought Jesus was going to come back during their lifetime? In fact, I've read that every time they would get to like the top of a hill or in a big open area, that they would look around like they were looking for somebody, and they were looking for Jesus. They were expecting him to just show up. And that was a couple of millennia ago, and he still hasn't shown up. Even the Apostle Peter wrote about it just a few years after Jesus' resurrection. In 2 Peter 3, verses 3 and 4, he says, "Above all, you must understand that in the last days scoffers will come, scoffing and following their own evil desires. They will say, 'Where is this coming he promised?' Ever since our ancestors died, everything goes on just as it has since the beginning of creation." And then in verses 8 and 9, he says, "But do not forget this one thing, dear friends. With the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day. The Lord is not slow in keeping his promises, as some understand slowness, but he is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance." So Jesus isn't waiting to return just to tease us. It's not that he moves super slow. Well, he does. but he has a purpose for his slowness. He is patient with us. There's that word patient again. He doesn't want anyone to perish. It says he wants everyone to have the opportunity to hear that good news, to hear the gospel, to believe, and to repent. So here is James reminding us to be patient as we wait for Jesus to return, no matter how long it takes. So how do we do that? Do we just sit around and do nothing? Just wait? Okay, Jesus, waiting for you to come back. I don't think so. I think there's plenty for us to do in the meantime, because the very next thing James says is he gives us an example of a farmer who patiently waits for his crops to grow. Now, I am not much of a farmer. I'm not really even much of a gardener, but my sister-in-law is. So I called her up and asked her, what do you do to get the ground? What do you do to prepare to grow things? And she said that in a nutshell, you have to prepare the ground. Depending on what kind of crop you're growing, depends on how you prepare it. It may need to be aerated, mulched. You may need to bring compost in. Of course, then you'll need to plant your crop, whether you use seeds or young plants. Then you need to feed them with water or nutrients or the sun. And again, depending on what you're growing, depends on what kind of nutrients you're using, or how much sun, what kind of sunlight they need. Do they need morning sun? Do they need filtered sun? Do they need 7 to 8 hours of sun? How much water do they need? Do they need a lot, a little? And then you also have to weed around your crops so they don't get choked out. And you may need to prune. You probably need to prune your crops because you don't want all those nutrients going to parts of the plant that aren't really going to produce the best fruit or vegetable or grain or whatever it is you're growing. So all that, gosh, that sounds like a lot of work to me. The farmer's job is never done. Still, you can do all that work. You can, plant and feed and prune and weed. And if it rains too much or too little, or if the frost comes too early or it hails, your crop may be doomed. But you think, okay, so why do I need to put in all that work if I don't know if I'm going to get a good crop or not? Well, on the other hand, God could send the perfect amount of rain at exactly the right time, but if you haven't prepared your soil or planted your crop, you're for sure not going to get anything, right? So it takes both. We depend on God to send the rain, but He expects us to make some effort in this whole process too. Then James repeats himself in verse 8. Be patient and stand firm, for the Lord's coming is near. 2 times in 2 verses, he says the same thing. So I think he's telling us, don't give up. Hold on. Live in anticipation. The Lord is coming. Now remember, James knows Jesus probably better than anybody else alive at this point in time, because he grew up with Jesus, right? They played tag and catch in the backyard. They worked with their dad in the carpenter shop together. They knew each other really, really well. And James knew Jesus never lied to him. He never broke any promises. If he said it, he was going to do it. So he is coming back, period. We can count on it. But in the meantime, we wait. What happens when we wait for something that seems to take forever? Like, for this pandemic to be over, or for the election to be done, or for life to just go back to normal. Seems like we've been doing this forever. What happens when we're waiting and waiting? Well, we start to grumble and complain and gripe and start sniping at each other and arguing and bickering. James warns us, don't do it. Please don't do it. You will be judged for doing this, and the judge is getting ready to show up. You don't want him to find you at each other's throats when he comes back. So just be patient. Hold on. Then he gives us another example. The prophets, those men and women of faith who spoke up for God, you remember them? Great heroes of the faith like Moses and David, Daniel, Jeremiah, Elijah, John the Baptist, Paul. Their lives are pretty cushy, right? No, I don't think so. They were an example of patience in the face of suffering. Let's look at them. Moses led over 1 million Jews, 1 million complaining Jews for 40 years in the wilderness. David was running for his life for years from King Saul, and this was after he was anointed king. Daniel was kidnapped from his country and forced to serve foreign kings all his life, and he was eventually thrown into a lion's den. Jeremiah, he was called the weeping prophet, and Elijah, he was on the run from Queen Jezebel for a good portion of his life. John the Baptist, he was imprisoned and beheaded. Paul was beaten and stoned and eventually killed. And this is just a random sampling. We could go on and on. So that's not very encouraging, is it? But James says we consider them blessed because they persevered. They held on. They didn't give up. And this isn't the first time that James has said this. In the first chapter of James, in verse 12, it says, "Blessed is the man who perseveres under trial, because when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him." So times will get hard. We'll go through some challenges, but God has promised us a reward. And then he gives that ultimate example in suffering, Job. Everybody knows about Job, right? Those other prophets ain't got nothing on Job, right? He's like suffering on steroids. You think you've got problems. Job had problems. You have money worries. All of Job's financial interests were wiped out in one day. You got problems with your kids. Job's kids were at a wild party and they were killed together on the same day. Yes. Poor health. Job had boils all over his body and was in constant pain. You've got marriage issues. Job's wife was a peach, wasn't she? Yeah. She actually told him to curse God and die. Yeah, not very sympathetic. And you have relationship challenges. How about Job's friends? Oh, yeah, those guys were great. Yeah, great supporters. But Job held on, even through the pain and the heartbreak. And God redeemed it all. He redeemed his finances, his children, his health, his marriage, and even his friends. So remember, James opens up his letter with this very issue. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you fall into various trials. They develop you, they strengthen you, refine you, make you mature and complete. Trials help you grow into this amazing person that God has created you to be. And so now James has come full circle toward the end of his letter and says, stand firm, persevere, hold on, don't give up, be patient. And he also warns us against making rash promises. In verse 12, he says, do not swear, not by heaven or by earth or by anything else. Let your yes be yes and your no, no, or you will be condemned. In other words, don't go around saying, God, if you heal me or my spouse or my child, then I will go to church every time the doors are open and even help out in the 2-year-old class. Or, hey, if you'll let this business deal go through and get me out of this mess that I've made it for myself, then I'll volunteer to teach the 7th grade boys for the rest of my life. When things are going well, we forget these foxhole promises, right? I don't think we can make deals with God. In fact, I don't really think we need to. In the previous verse, James says God is full of compassion and mercy. Whatever you're going through, God is compassionate and merciful. After all, Jesus went through this too, right? He was hated, misunderstood, he was ridiculed, beaten, and eventually killed. So he understands our suffering. He's been where we are, But of course, he sees the big picture. He knows the end of the story, even when we don't. How one day that maybe we might be talked about like those great heroes of the faith, like David and Moses and Jeremiah and Paul. I don't think those guys, when they were going through their tough times, realized that one day we'd be holding them up as great examples of perseverance and endurance and patience. So maybe someday people will remember us for being patient and persevering through these tough times, how we stood firm and we waited for Christ's coming. We stood the test, and now he has a crown of life ready and waiting for us. That's the hope we have as we patiently persevere through all that life throws at us. A couple of things before I let you go. I want to remind you that we've got the shoebox project. We're bringing shoeboxes in to send out to children all over the world for Christmas. If you haven't picked up your shoebox, pick it up. I think this Sunday is probably the last Sunday you can pick it up, because we need to have them in by the 22nd so they can get mailed out and get to the children in time for Christmas. If you don't want to get out and go shopping, there is an online option available. And so if you want to choose that option, that's great too. Our goal is 300 shoeboxes, and that would be incredible if we could meet that goal. Also, if you are new to Boulevard and want to find out a little bit more about us and what we believe and what our mission is, then we're holding a class called Discover Boulevard at 10:35 this coming Sunday. So join us. It'll be in the music room, which is in the East Hall, just past the bathrooms and the water fountains. And come and find out from James and Tony just what Boulevard's all about. And hopefully you'll want to be a part of it too. Great to talk to you this afternoon. Make sure you check out Jim next Tuesday afternoon as he finishes up our study in James. Thank you very much. Bye.